It all started with a sound. Not a loud or alarming one, on the contrary, it was almost polite. A delicate, melodic chime, the kind a smartphone makes to announce something of little importance. I first heard it on a Tuesday, standing at my kitchen sink, watching raindrops trace winding paths down the windowpane. In Portland, Oregon, rain isn't an event. It's the ambient noise of life, as familiar as morning coffee. The sound repeated, 3 short, electronic notes. I glanced around. My iPhone was on the granite countertop, screen down. The iPad was upstairs in my bedroom. No other gadgets were nearby. I shrugged. The neighbor's kids must have left their electric scooter by the fence again. Or maybe it was a new alert from the sanitation truck. At 64, the world is full of new sounds your brain hasn't yet learned to categorize and ignore. I dried my hands and returned to my orchids, gently wiping their broad, waxy leaves. The sound didn't come back, dissolving into the monotonous whisper of the rain. My life in retirement was a carefully constructed edifice of rituals and small pleasures. For 40 years, I'd been a school psychologist, immersing myself in the chaos of other people's adolescent dramas, listening to stories of bullying, parental divorces, and first heartbreaks. I was a harbor, a quiet office with a comfortable chair and a box of tissues on the table. Now, my primary job was to maintain order in my own universe. My 2-story craftsman in the Lads Edition neighborhood, with its rose garden and ancient oak tree, was my kingdom. Mornings were for back-friendly yoga and a scan of the news on MSNBC, followed by tending the garden. Wednesdays were for the book club with Carol and Linda. Fridays, I volunteered at the local library, helping kids with their reading. My son, Mark, a successful software engineer in Seattle, called on Sundays. I loved him more than anything, but a gulf of technology and different life philosophies lay between us. He lived in the future. I lived in a well-organized present. After my husband passed away 5 years ago, I'd learned how to be by myself. I wasn't lonely. I had friends, hobbies, books. But in the evenings, when the house fell silent, I'd sometimes feel a void. It wasn't a sharp pain, but rather a chronic, dull ache for someone with whom I could share the silence. Michael appeared a year ago on a sunny July morning. Our mutual friend Carol had talked me into coming to the annual plant sale in the city park. I was searching for a rare variety of hydrangea when I heard a low, velvety voice behind me. If you're looking for an endless summer, you're too late. I just bought the last one. I turned around. Before me stood a tall man about my age, in jeans and a faded Portland Timbers t-shirt. His eyes twinkled with amusement, and in his hands, he held the very pot I'd been looking for. That's hardly fair, I smiled. I've been hunting for that one all morning. Well then, he said, offering me the pot. Consider it found. I can't have a lovely lady leaving disappointed. His name was Michael. He was a retired general contractor, a widower, and he lived a few blocks from Carol. We talked until the fair closed about gardening, about old Portland, about children who grew up too fast. There wasn't a hint of pretense or practiced pickup lines in his manner. He was genuine. When he asked if I'd like to get coffee the following week, I agreed without a moment's hesitation, much to my own surprise. For the first time in 5 years, I wasn't just comfortable with a new person. I was intrigued. Our coffee turned into lunches, and lunches into long walks along the Willamette River. Michael was easy to be with. He had a rare gift, the ability to listen. Not just waiting for his turn to speak, but truly hearing you. I told him about my work, about the difficult cases that still haunted me, and he asked the right questions. In turn, he shared stories about construction sites, about how homes for families were born from blueprints and concrete. One autumn evening, the wiring in my kitchen shorted out. The lights went out, and I was cursing in the dark, trying to find the circuit breaker in the basement. I called him, just to complain, but 15 minutes later, he was on my doorstep with a toolbox and a flashlight. He spent over an hour patiently and methodically fixing the problem. When the lights flickered back on, I saw his face smudged with dust and felt an incredible wave of gratitude and something more. Warmth. He expected nothing in return. He just helped because he could. That evening, I realized the void I'd been living with was starting to fill. He brought me pastries from a local bakery on Saturdays, fixed everything that broke in my old house, and never once pushed my boundaries. He was the embodiment of reliability, a man who brought a long-forgotten sense of partnership back into my life. On a Thursday morning, I called Mark, wanting to share my good mood. I told him Michael had stopped by with a basket of strawberries and that we were planning to see Casablanca at the outdoor movie screening in the park that evening. "Hey, Mom. I'm about to jump on a conference call, so I've only got a minute." His voice was, as usual, strained. I ignored his tone. "I just wanted to say hi and let you know everything's great." A pause hung on the line. I knew what was coming. "Mom, are you sure about this Michael guy? It's been a year and you still don't really know him. At your age, you need to be careful. Mark, he's 67. He grows roses and fixes wiring. He's not exactly the Tinder swindler. I'm just worried." I Googled him. He's a contractor, a couple of old parking tickets. Nothing major, but still. People aren't always who they seem. Just be careful, okay? Look, I've got to run. I'll call Sunday. Love you. I love you too, I said to a deadline. I put the phone down, an unpleasant feeling settling in my stomach. The psychologist in me understood his motive's fear of loss, anxiety for his remaining parent. But the mother in me felt a sting of resentment. He didn't trust my judgment. He didn't trust my ability to read people, the very skill that had supported our family for 40 years. The evening in the park was exactly as I'd imagined. The air was warm for August, smelling of freshly cut grass and popcorn. Michael brought a thick wool blanket and a thermos of my favorite peppermint tea. We sat on the grass, surrounded by other couples and families. When the first black and white frames of Casablanca appeared on the giant inflatable screen, he silently took my hand. His palm was warm and slightly rough from a lifetime of work, the hand of a man who knew how to build and fix things. We watched the movie, barely speaking, in one of those rare moments in life when words are unnecessary. I felt completely happy, calm, safe. When Humphrey Bogart delivered his famous line, "We'll always have Paris," I leaned my head on Michael's shoulder. He gently kissed the top of my head. In that moment, the world felt simple and right. Mark and his suspicions were far away in his digital universe of risks and threats. Here, on the grass under the stars, there was only real life. And it was beautiful. After the movie, he walked me to my door. "Thank you for a wonderful evening, Clara," he said. "Thank you, Michael," I replied. He didn't try to come in. He was always a gentleman. The next day, Friday, I was cleaning out my purse from the night before. Grass clippings, cookie crumbs, a movie program. I emptied everything onto the table and started putting things away. That's when I realized I couldn't find my keys. An irritating little detail. I was sure I had dropped them in my bag, but they weren't there. Pockets of my coat, my jeans, nothing. Remembering the Apple AirTag Mark had given me for Christmas, so you don't lose things, Mom, I picked up my iPhone. I opened the Find My app. I tapped Find Keys. A second later, a familiar melodic chime echoed from the bedroom. They had fallen behind the dresser. I let out a sigh of relief. But as I was about to close the app, a notification at the top of my screen caught my eye. It had been there before, but I'd ignored it. "AirTag found moving with you." I frowned. Strange. Probably a glitch. Maybe it was reacting to my own tag. I tapped the notification. A map opened on the screen. An icy hand gripped my heart. There was a thin red line on the map. It started at the park where we'd watched the movie and led directly to my house. Then I saw the location history for the past few days. A dot at Carol's house. A route to the library. This morning's trip to the grocery store. The blood drained from my face. This had to be a mistake. A glitch. It couldn't be real. My hands were trembling as I opened the Find My app again and selected the option to play sound for the unknown AirTag. And then I heard it. The exact same sound. The same polite, 3-note chime I'd heard on Tuesday at the sink. But this time, it wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from the hallway. It was coming from my purse, hanging on a hook by the door. I approached it on unsteady legs. The sound grew louder. I plunged my hand inside, fumbling past my wallet, glasses, and notebook. My fingers found a tear in the lining, a small pocket I never knew existed. Inside was a small, round object, cold to the touch. I pulled it out into the light. A white plastic disc the size of a quarter. Perfectly clean. Silent. It lay on my trembling palm, its glossy surface reflecting the terrified, utterly alien gaze of a woman who had just realized her quiet, orderly universe was a lie. My body's first reaction was revolt. My stomach twisted into an icy knot, and nausea rose in my throat. I rushed to the bathroom, but nothing came up just dry, agonizing heaves that shook my frame. I splashed cold water on my face, staring at my reflection. Pale skin, dilated pupils, the network of lines around my eyes suddenly stark and deep. The woman in the mirror looked back at me in horror. I placed the AirTag on the counter. It sat there, small and white, like a poisonous mushroom that had sprouted in my garden. My home, my fortress, had suddenly turned into a glass aquarium. Every wall felt transparent. Every corner where Michael and I had shared tea, where he had fixed an outlet, where we had laughed, it was all tainted. I felt as if I'd been robbed, but what was stolen wasn't an object. It was a year of my life, my trust, my sense of safety. I went back to the kitchen and bolted the front door. Then I walked through the house, drawing the curtains in every room, plunging my home into twilight. The light had become hostile. The silence was deafening. My mind, trained by years of professional practice, desperately tried to find logic, to build a defense against the encroaching panic. Easy, Clara. Analyze the facts. Fact 1. There is a foreign tracking device in my purse. Fact 2. It has been logging my movements. But who put it there? My brain immediately supplied innocent explanations. Could it have fallen into my bag by accident at the park? Could it be Carol's? A glitch in the Apple system? I was ready to believe anything to avoid confronting the one horrifying truth. Michael. He had been right there. He had held me. He had sat beside me on the blanket while this little white disc in my bag was transmitting a signal. I began frantically combing through my memories of our time together, searching for red flags. Small, insignificant details surfaced. The time he'd asked why I hadn't gone to my dental appointment when I'd only mentioned it in passing. How he would coincidentally show up at the same store, saying, "Fancy meeting you here." At the time, it had seemed like a sweet coincidence, a sign of his affection. Now, those memories took on a sinister glow. It wasn't affection. It was surveillance. I forced myself to sit down at my laptop. Panic is a poor advisor. I needed information. My fingers, still clumsy, typed AirTag stalking into the search bar. The results were an avalanche. Hundreds of articles. Online forums where women shared stories, each more terrifying than the last. Ex-husbands, jealous boyfriends, casual acquaintances. They hid the trackers in cars, in children's toys, in the linings of coats. I read about the technology's loopholes, how the speaker could be disabled to prevent it from making noise, how it used the network of millions of other iPhones to report its location. My world had been turned upside down. A technology designed to find lost keys had become the perfect tool for a stalker. I understood two things. First, I wasn't crazy. This was real. Second, if I went to the police right now with nothing but a small white disc, they would likely listen with polite sympathy and send me home. I needed proof. Incontrovertible proof. The next morning, I was supposed to meet Michael for breakfast. My first instinct was to cancel, to hide, to never see him again. But the psychologist in me protested. I couldn't spook him. I needed to observe. I texted him, "Good morning." Woke up with a terrible migraine. "Let's reschedule for tomorrow." Going to spend the day in bed. His reply came a minute later. "Of course, sweetheart. Get some rest. Need me to bring you anything?" Medicine, soup, the concern. So familiar, so fake. I replied that I had everything I needed. Then I began to act. I left my iPhone at home on the kitchen table. I took an old prepaid flip phone I kept in the car for emergencies. I didn't drive to the coast, as I'd planned yesterday. Instead, I got in my car and drove in the opposite direction, toward a small town at the foot of Mount Hood. I walked its unfamiliar streets, drank coffee in a nondescript cafe, feeling like a spy in my own life. Every hour, I checked the old phone. No calls. Good. He thought I was at home, in bed, trackable and predictable. I didn't return home until late that evening. My iPhone showed 3 missed calls from Michael and several texts. The first, from the afternoon, "How are you feeling?" The second, in the evening, "Hope you're better. Just thinking of you." The third, sent an hour ago, was different. "Drove past your house. The lights are out. Is everything okay? I'm worried." My heart skipped a beat. "Drove past?" He lived on the other side of town. That wasn't on the way, it was a checkup. He had seen I wasn't home, even though I'd said I would be in bed. He had seen my phone, my digital avatar was in place, but I was not. A discrepancy. He was nervous. When he called 10 minutes later, I forced myself to answer in a calm, sleepy voice. "Hi. Sorry, I took some medication and passed out." "Thank God," he said, and the relief in his voice was genuine. I was starting to get worried. I worry about you." In that moment, I knew I could do this. I could wear the mask. I could play the part of the trusting, unsuspecting woman until I was ready to make my move. The next day, Sunday, Mark called on schedule. A part of me desperately wanted to tell him everything. To tell him about the AirTag, the fear, Michael's lies. To ask for help. I decided to try. Stripping all emotion from my voice, I laid out the facts as methodically as I would for a patient file, the tracker, the location map, Michael's checkup. I waited for support, for alarm, maybe even an offer to drive down from Seattle immediately. Instead, I received a dose of patronizing skepticism. "Mom, are you sure? Couldn't it be a mistake? The AirTag could have belonged to someone sitting near you in the park. And him driving by. Well, maybe he was just really worried. Michael seems like such a nice guy. Maybe you're just, after Dad. A little lonely and overanalyzing things. Every word was a slap in the face. He wasn't just disbelieving me. He was diagnosing me. I, who had spent 40 years helping people navigate their fears, was now an unreliable narrator in the eyes of my own son. "Mark, I am not paranoid," I said, my voice cold. "I know, Mom. Just don't jump to conclusions. Keep an eye on it." He hung up, promising to call during the week. In that moment, I felt truly alone. Not because I had been betrayed by a lover, but because the person closest to me in the world had refused to grant me his trust. The loneliness was cold and heavy, but it also brought clarity. My family wouldn't help me. The police, probably not yet. I needed people who wouldn't question my words. People for whom my story was not a misunderstanding, but a daily reality. A Google search led me to the website for the Portland Women's Crisis Line. They had a special program for cyber stalking and digital harassment. I hesitated for only a minute before dialing the number. A calm, youthful voice answered. I began my story, expecting to hear the same skepticism I'd heard from my son. But the young woman, whose name was Aisha, listened without interruption, only occasionally interjecting, "I understand," or "That must have been terrifying." She didn't doubt me. Not for a second. "Clara," she said when I finished, "you did everything exactly right. You gathered initial information and you didn't spook him. What you're describing is a classic pattern of cyber stalking behavior. You are not alone. We can help you." For the first time in 3 days, I felt like I could breathe. I wasn't just believed. I was offered a plan. Aisha explained that to get a stalking protective order, I needed an incident log and, ideally, evidence that couldn't be disputed. The AirTag was a start, but it might not be enough. Michael's lawyer could claim he'd simply lost it. We needed more. We needed to prove intent. "He's controlling you in the digital world," Aisha said. "We have to use that world against him." She gave me my first instructions. For 1 week, I was to act completely normal, seeing Michael, smiling at him. At the same time, I was to document every suspicious comment, every coincidental appearance. And she gave me the address of a specialty electronics store and the name of a device I needed to buy. It was small, discreet, but it had the power to change everything. That evening, I sat in my car in the store's parking lot. Neon signs glowed in the storefront, reflecting off the rain-slicked asphalt. I looked at my hands on the steering wheel. They were no longer shaking. The fear hadn't vanished. It was a cold knot in my stomach. But something new had appeared alongside it. Something solid. A cold, sharp resolve. He thought he had backed me into a corner. He thought I was just an elderly, lonely woman, easy to control. He didn't know who he was dealing with. He had woken up the part of me that had spent 40 years listening to other people's pain and teaching children how to fight back. Now it was my turn. Even then, when it felt like all was lost, I refused to give up. The device Aisha had recommended was tiny and cold in my palm. A digital voice recorder no bigger than a tie clip. As I looked at it, a wave of nausea washed over me. This was the point of no return. My entire professional life, I had advocated for openness, dialogue, and trust. Now, I was about to invade someone's privacy to become a spy, to become like him. The thought was repulsive. I almost abandoned the whole plan, but the image of that red line on my phone's map, crawling behind me through the streets of my city, gave me strength. This wasn't an act of aggression. It was an act of self-defense. The perfect opportunity presented itself 3 days later. We were in his SUV, on our way to a movie, when I accidentally spilled coffee on the passenger seat, having loosened the lid beforehand. "Oh, Michael, I'm so sorry. I'm so clumsy," I exclaimed, my panic almost genuine. He just waved it off. "Don't worry about it, Clara. It's nothing. The seats are leather. It'll wipe right off." But I insisted, with the desperation of someone clinging to their only chance. "No, I can't just leave it. Let me come by tomorrow morning and clean it properly with a special conditioner? Please, let me fix my mistake." He smiled at my insistence, a smile that once seemed warm but now felt condescending. He agreed. The next morning, with a bottle of leather cleaner in one hand and the recorder clutched in the other until my knuckles were white, I walked up to his car. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it was audible. The air was damp, smelling of wet pavement. I opened the door and forced myself to breathe. As I made a show of diligently scrubbing the upholstery, my other hand slipped under the seat. My fingers found the cold, dusty metal frame. They were trembling, and I nearly dropped the recorder. I froze, listening. He was standing on his porch, watching me. I could feel his gaze on my back. I forced a smile, gave him a little wave, and as he was distracted waving back, I attached the magnetic recorder to the frame, deep in the shadows. The entire procedure took less than 10 seconds, but they stretched into an eternity. "There, good as new," I said brightly, closing the door. He thanked me, walked over, and kissed my cheek. His touch felt like a burn. I walked away without looking back, feeling dirty and terrified, but also for the first time in days not helpless. The hardest week of my life began. I was living in 2 separate realities. In one, I was Clara, the loving partner who went out to dinner with Michael, discussed the news, and smiled at his jokes. In the other, I was the investigator who, every 2 days, found an excuse to retrieve the recorder, download the audio files to a secure laptop, and return the bug to its hiding place. Listening to those recordings was a form of torture. For hours, it was nothing but road noise and the radio. But in between, there were the monologues. Quiet, spoken under his breath when he thought he was alone. Went to the library. Good. On schedule. Said she'd be at Carol's until 5. We'll see. These weren't stray thoughts. They were status reports, as if he were checking in with an invisible supervisor. The most damning recording came on the 5th day. He was on the phone with his brother. I could hear the muffled sounds of the other person, but Michael's voice was clear. "No, she has no idea. She thinks I'm just looking out for her. Women her age are so desperate for attention, they'll believe anything. It's even easier than I thought. Yeah, sure, she's nice. But that's not the point, you know that. The point is to keep her close. After Susan left, I'm not going through any more surprises. Ever. I will know her every move. It's the only way to be sure you won't be betrayed again." I hit pause. The room was spinning. It was never about me. I was a replacement, a surrogate object for his past trauma and his pathological need for control. His late wife, Susan, hadn't just died. She had left, and he had decided he would not let that happen to him again. I wasn't a person to him. I was a function, an object to be managed to soothe his own pain. I rewound the recording and listened again, this time with cold professionalism. I took notes, documenting everything. My personal pain was giving way to an icy rage. 2 weeks later, I sat in the office of Maria, the lawyer from the crisis center. A folder lay on the desk between us, filled with my evidence, the map printouts, my log of his coincidental appearances, and a flash drive with the audio files, each accompanied by a transcript. Maria reviewed everything meticulously. "Clara," she said, looking up at me, "this is more than enough. This isn't just stalking. This is calculated, cold-blooded psychological abuse. We're ready to file." She looked at me very seriously. "But you need to be prepared, Clara. His lawyer will do everything possible to discredit you. They will say you're lonely, depressed, that you're looking for attention. They will use your age and your status as a widow against you. They will try to make you question your own sanity. Your job is to not let them. Answer only the question asked. No emotion. Can you do that?" I thought of dozens of contentious parent-teacher conferences, of aggressive fathers and weeping mothers. I thought of how I'd remained calm when a teenager in my office screamed that he hated the world. "Yes," I said firmly. "I can do that. We filed the petition." I watched from my living room window as the order was served. Michael had arrived at my house, bouquet of roses in hand, as if nothing were wrong. As he walked up my front path, a process server stepped out of a car and intercepted him. I watched Michael read the papers. I saw his face shift through the stages, confusion, denial, and then rage. He crushed the bouquet in his hand, rose petals scattering on the pavement. He looked up and stared directly at my window. The warmth in his eyes was gone. In its place was a cold, calculating anger. I didn't step back. I met his gaze until he turned and walked away. The war had begun. The courtroom in the Multnomah County Courthouse was cold and impersonal. Michael sat at the opposing table with his lawyer, a polished man in an expensive suit. Michael looked impeccable, a grieving, wrongly accused gentleman. His lawyer, a Mr. Davenport, was a master of narrative. He began his cross-examination by addressing me with a lethal politeness. "Mrs. Bennett, you were grieving the loss of your husband quite deeply, weren't you?" I was grieving, as anyone in my position would, I answered evenly. "And you felt lonely?" "I have an active social life, but I won't deny moments of loneliness. And into your life comes my client, Mr. Albright, a caring, attentive gentleman. Is it possible, Mrs. Bennett, that in your vulnerable emotional state, you simply misinterpreted his concern? That his desire to know you were safe struck you as something more sinister?" The room was silent. I could feel dozens of eyes on me. I took a breath and looked directly at Davenport. "Counselor," I began, drawing on my 40 years of remaining calm under pressure. "My emotional state has no bearing on the facts. And the fact is that an electronic surveillance device was placed in my purse without my knowledge or consent. Concern does not hide in the lining of a handbag. Concern is based on respect. And what your client did was an act of total disrespect and a violation of my personal boundaries." Davenport was momentarily thrown. Then it was Maria's turn. She methodically presented the map, the log. Finally, she requested permission to play the audio recording. After a brief skirmish with Davenport, the judge nodded. Maria played the recording of Michael's phone call with his brother. In the dead-silent courtroom, his voice was loud and clear. Women her age are so desperate for attention. I'm not going through any more surprises. I looked at Michael. His face was a stone mask. He wasn't looking at the judge. He was looking at me, and in his eyes, I saw not just anger. I saw the panic of a predator caught in a trap. The judge delivered her ruling quickly. A permanent stalking protective order. But the most important part came in her closing remarks. "The court recognizes," she said, looking over her glasses at Michael, "that the use of modern technology, such as tracking devices, to control and intimidate a partner is not merely an invasion of privacy, but a form of domestic abuse. It is a digital leash, and it has no place in a civilized society. Mr. Albright, what you call concern, This court calls obsession. In that moment, I didn't feel triumph, but a profound sense of relief. I had been heard. I had been validated. That evening, Mark called. A story about the ruling had been picked up by the Oregonian's website. His voice was shaking. "Mom." I read the article. They quoted the judge. "Oh my God, Mom, I'm so sorry. I was such an idiot. I should have believed you. I wasn't listening to you. I was listening to my own stereotypes about what it means to be an older person. I was so wrong. Please forgive me." I could hear the tears in his voice. And I understood that my victory was twofold. I hadn't just defeated a stalker. I had broken through the wall of my own son's condescension. "We have a lot to talk about, Mark," I said, my voice soft but firm. "But not right now. I need some time." I had won back more than my safety. I had won back my credibility. I changed the locks. I installed a new security system. But the real change was internal. A month later, I walked into the offices of the Portland Women's Crisis Line. I found Aisha. "I want to help," I told her. We developed a program. I began facilitating a support group for women over 50 who had experienced abuse, including digital stalking. Every week, we gathered in a small, comfortable room. I saw in their eyes the same fear and shame I had felt. One of them, a woman named Rosa, described how her ex-husband controlled her through their smart home system, turning lights on and off in the middle of the night to terrorize her. "The first thing they take from you," I told the group, looking at Rosa's face, "is not your freedom. It's your certainty, your belief in your own mind. They make you think you're the crazy one. Our first job is to take that back. You are not crazy. You are in danger. And you are not alone." I taught them how to document incidents, how to speak to the police, how to resist manipulation. I saw the fear in their eyes give way to resolve. My trauma had become my tool. My pain was now a source of strength for others. A year passed. I stood in my garden on a warm August evening, pruning my roses. The air was thick with their sweet, heavy scent. I no longer flinched at every unfamiliar sound. I no longer checked the lining of my purse. The scars were there, but they no longer ached. I thought about Michael, not with hatred, but with the cool, professional curiosity of a psychologist. He was a broken man who had tried to fix his own life by breaking someone else's. He wanted to trap me within the borders of his map, his control, his fear. He thought he was setting a trap for me. But all he did was force me to step outside the boundaries of my quiet, comfortable world and discover a strength I never knew I possessed. He wanted to make me his property, and in the end, he only succeeded in returning me to myself. Life has taught me that justice is not always loud retribution. Sometimes it is the quiet, diligent work of rebuilding your own world. It is the ability to stand in your own garden again, to breathe in the scent of roses, and to know that you are safe. Not because evil has vanished from the world, but because you found the strength within yourself to face it. And you won.